I'm 32. I moved into my condo about 8 months ago, after the kind of breakup that takes a year off the front of your face. I'm not bitter about it. I just say that to be honest. I lived with someone for almost 6 years, and now I live alone, and the part that took the most getting used to wasn't the silence. It was the small things. Doing groceries by myself. Cooking for one. The fact that nobody else knows where I am at any given moment. I have a routine for the groceries. There's a store about 10 minutes from my building, off the main road that runs through the older part of town. It's not the closest one. There's a closer chain right off the highway, but I don't like the lighting in there. The store I go to is smaller, quieter, mostly older couples on Saturday mornings. I usually go Sunday evenings around 7, when there's basically no one in the aisles and the staff are restocking for Monday. This was a Sunday like that. Late September. I had gotten back from my friend Janie's apartment around 6:15, dropped my overnight bag in my entryway, grabbed my car keys, and gone right back out. I remember thinking, on the drive over, that I'd had a really nice weekend. I felt good. Settled. I want to be clear about that, because I don't want anyone reading this to think I was already on edge. I wasn't. I was thinking about whether I had enough garlic at home. The store has the layout I know by heart. You come in past the floral section, then produce, then meat and fish along the back wall, dairy on the left side, dry goods in the middle, frozen at the end. I always do the same loop. Produce, deli, dairy, dry goods, frozen, checkout. I'm not someone who wanders. I have a list, and I work the list. I noticed him in produce. I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want to make it seem like I picked up on it right away. I didn't. He was just a man, mid-40s, maybe a little older, dark baseball cap, gray jacket. I noticed him only because he was standing in front of the bagged spinach, and I needed the spinach, and I had to wait for him to move. He took a while. Eventually he stepped aside, and I grabbed mine, and I forgot about him. I saw him again in dairy, same cap. He was standing in front of the yogurts. I needed yogurt, but I went around him and grabbed the brand I always get from the next door over, and I think that's when something in the back of my head said, oh. Just, oh. Not anything dramatic, just the kind of, oh, you get when a coincidence stops feeling like one. I tested it. I wasn't even thinking of it as a test at the time, but in retrospect, that's what it was. I cut across the store on a diagonal, from dairy all the way to the spice aisle, which I didn't even need anything from. I lingered for a minute, pretending to read the back of a cinnamon jar. He came around the corner with his cart. He didn't look at me. He pretended to look at the rices on the opposite shelf. His cart had 2 things in it, a loaf of bread, a liter of soda water. That was all. He had been in the store at least as long as I had. That was when my body knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. The thing I want to describe, and this is going to sound cliché, but I'm telling you this is exactly what it felt like, is that the lighting in the store seemed to change. It didn't, of course. The lighting was the same, but the aisles felt longer. The store music sounded farther away. I started to be very aware of where my keys were in my jacket pocket and where my phone was in my hand, and that I had not told a single person which store I had gone to. I didn't run. I want to say this because everyone always asks, why didn't you just leave? You don't just leave. When you've been a woman in public your whole life, you have a whole catalog of small adjustments you make instead of leaving, because you don't want to look hysterical, and you don't want to be wrong, and you don't want him to know you've noticed, because if he hasn't actually noticed you yet, then letting him know you've noticed him is its own kind of escalation. So you adjust. I went to the bathroom. There's a single-stall bathroom near the front of the store, by customer service. I stood in there for maybe 4 minutes, not doing anything, just listening. I washed my hands twice, then I came out and walked the long way back through the store, watching for him. He was in the frozen section. Same cart, same 2 items. He was looking at his phone. I want to tell you what I noticed about him then, because I keep coming back to it. He wasn't doing the things a person who is stalking somebody does in movies. He wasn't visibly tense. He wasn't sweating or rushed. He was patient in a way I have only ever seen in people doing a job, like he was running a route, like he was on the clock and the clock was long. I went to check out. The manned lanes had lines, but the self-checkout was open. I took a terminal at the far end of the row, the one with the best sightline to the front doors. I grabbed 2 of the paper bags from the stack on the bagging shelf and started ringing my groceries through. He came to the terminal next to mine. I didn't see him walk up. I just looked over at one point and he was there, scanning his bread. The bagging shelves at those self-checkouts share a low partition between terminals. My open paper bag was sitting on my side of it. I remember being angry that he'd picked the terminal closest to me when there were 5 empty ones. I kept scanning my own items, faster now, watching him in my peripheral vision, waiting for him to finish. He scanned his soda water. He paid. He walked out the front. He never looked at me once. I rang the rest of my items through. I paid. I gathered up my 2 bags, one in each hand, and walked out the front sliding doors with my keys clutched between my fingers. He was in the parking lot. He wasn't standing near my car. I want you to understand this. He wasn't waiting for me. He was over by his own car, 4 rows away, putting his bag in his trunk. He wasn't looking at me. If I had seen him from across that parking lot without any context, I would have thought, that man is putting groceries in his trunk. But he was taking too long to do it. That's the only thing I can tell you. He was just taking too long. I walked to my car. I didn't run, but I walked the way you walk when you'd really like to run. I put my bags on the passenger seat and started the engine. I left the lot, the back way, sat at the next light for a long 30 seconds watching my mirror, and drove home on a route that took me 11 extra minutes because I went past my own building twice before I turned in. Nobody followed me. I want to be very clear about that. Nobody followed me home. I checked. I drove like I was trying to lose somebody, and there was no one to lose. I got into my parking garage. I locked my car. I rode the elevator to my floor, and the hallway was empty, and my door was locked, and inside everything was exactly the way I left it. I felt the relief of someone who had handled a thing. I cried a little just from the adrenaline coming down. Then I made dinner, pasta, the garlic I'd been worried about, and I texted Jamie about it. She said, "Please tell me you got the license plate." I said, "No." She said, "You really should have." I said, "I know." That's where I thought the story ended. I need you to feel that with me. That was the ending in my head. Some guy followed me at the grocery store, and I got out of it without anything happening. A story I'd tell at brunch. I started putting the groceries away while I was on the phone with Jamie, half listening, because that's the kind of multitasking you do when you live alone, and you've stopped noticing how much you talk to other people through a screen. I lifted the milk out of the cold bag, and there was something pressed against the side of the carton, between the milk and the wall of the paper bag. A piece of folded paper. It was folded once. The paper was a particular yellowed cream color that I recognized before I unfolded it, because it was the same paper as the journal I keep in the drawer next to my bed, a drawer with the lock on it, the drawer I'd locked again last week, because I'd been writing in it before bed, and I'd been startled by my own reflection in the dark window, and I'd locked it the way you lock a thing when you've been startled. The page was torn along the spine edge, cleanly. Someone had pulled it the right way, the way you'd pull it if you wanted it to come out without damaging the rest of the journal. I told Jamie I'd call her back. I unfolded it on the counter. It was an entry from August 12th, 6 weeks earlier. I knew the date because the date was at the top, in my handwriting, and I knew the entry because I remembered writing it. I had written it on a Tuesday night in bed, after a long day at work. The entry was about how good my apartment had started to feel, how I had started, finally, to feel like I lived somewhere safe. How for the first time in months, I didn't check the locks twice before going to sleep. It ended with one sentence on its own line, in my own handwriting, in my own ink. "I think I'm finally okay being here alone." I read that line standing in the kitchen of my own apartment, and I want to describe what happened in my head as clearly as I can, because it didn't happen all at once. It happened in stages. First I thought, this isn't possible. Then I thought, I must have torn this out myself. I must have used it as a bookmark. I must have left it in a coat pocket. Then I thought, no, because I knew exactly where my journal was. It was in the drawer. The drawer was locked. The key was on a small hook on the inside of the drawer above it, where it had been since I moved in. The page hadn't come from the drawer tonight. I would have heard. The page had come from the drawer at some other point. The page had been sitting in someone's pocket, waiting. Tonight, in the grocery store, while I was buying spinach and yogurt, that page had been in his pocket, while he was standing in front of the bagged greens, while he was looking at his phone and frozen, while he was at the self-checkout. It had been on him the whole time. He had not followed me into the store to find me. He had not been chasing me. He had been waiting for me. He had been waiting because he knew I would be there at 7, because he knew my Sunday routine, because he had been in my apartment, in my bedroom, in the drawer next to my bed, and he had read my private writing, and he had chosen this specific entry, and he had carried it around for I don't know how many days, looking for the right moment to drop it in my bag. The store hadn't been the start of anything. The store had been him telling me how late I was to noticing. I called the police. They came. One of the officers, a younger woman, looked at the page for a long time and said, in a careful voice, "Do you have any cameras at your door?" And I said no, and she said, "You should think about that." She took the page with her. She told me they'd canvassed the lot for footage. She told me the description I had: middle-aged white man, baseball cap, gray jacket, mid-sized sedan, no plate I caught. Was, and she didn't say this part out loud, but she said it with her face. Close to useless. She asked if I had any idea who he was. I said no. She asked if I had ever felt watched at home. I said no. I said I had felt something once, last week, when I locked the drawer. She gave me a look I'm going to remember. I'm at Jamie's now most nights. I still pay rent on the condo. I haven't been back since last Tuesday. I'm going to go this weekend with Jamie and her brother. We're going to walk through the apartment together. We're going to open the drawer. We're going to look at what else might be missing. I have already started making a list in my head of things I haven't seen in a while. A hairbrush I thought I'd lost, an earring I thought went down the bathroom drain, a sweater I thought was at my parents', things I didn't notice at the time because I had no reason to. I want to tell you the worst part, not the page, not the man, not the store. The worst part is that for 6 weeks, I felt safe. I wrote that I felt safe. I wrote it down in a private place, in private handwriting, in a locked drawer, and I went to sleep. And somebody read it, and kept it, and waited until I needed yogurt.